Well, I'd like to start today by talking about a couple of really interesting stats put out by both the CDC and the National Education Association. About 160,000 kids skip class every single day because they're afraid of physical harm. Now, for me, when I was in high school, I played Magic the Gathering. I was in theater, and I was kind of a target myself when I was in high school. And it can be really hard for a lot of students, so much so that the third leading cause of death among teens in high school is suicide. In fact, according to the CDC, about 1 in 16 kids have actually attempted suicide, and every year about 4,500 succeed in carrying it out. So today what I wanted to talk to you about was about SchoolTipline, which is really the leading system for two-way anonymous incident reporting for students and parents to talk to school officials that have been trying to help them. We've had a lot of success with the program over the last few years, being able to stop all kinds of events, including suicide, kids taking drugs in school, fights, all kinds of amazing things that the system's able to do. And the reason why that is because of this. About 85% of the time, no one intervenes when a student is bullied. About 4% of the time, another student might intervene. 11% of the time, a teacher or some school administrator might intervene. But 85% of the time, nobody comes forward. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is the fact that school administrators oftentimes don't know that things are going on because the students don't come forward. And the reasons that the students don't come forward, there's a whole lot. One of the biggest being the fact that students are afraid that if they come forward, they'll be viewed as snitches or tattletales. Worse yet, that they fear that they might even become the target of retaliation if they were to come forward and try to help to end problems that are occurring at the school. So SchoolTipline really has a couple of different keys that are really important. Obviously, you need to have tools that you can report with and that you can track information with. But in our minds, you really, besides having just that tool, you also have to be able to educate the kids. So we try to do a bunch of work with schools to help administrators know how they can reach the kids, give them tools, not just for reporting, which I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about today, but also so that they can spend time getting awareness out to the kids about the issues and helping them feel like this is a safe place to speak up. What we've discovered is that when kids take ownership of a tipline system where they're reporting anonymously and being able to have a two-way conversation with the administrators, they're more likely to use it and to use it well if they feel they're truly anonymous and they take ownership of the system. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So just to give you an idea, like I said, about 15% of the time you'll get somebody coming forward. Usually that's going to be in person. But what we do at SchoolTipline is we try to help kids speak up through other ways. One of the biggest ones, obviously, is through text messaging. Text messaging is really effective with students and really became popular because, for those of you who have kids, you've probably noticed that when you're texting, nobody hears what you're saying. It feels really safe. It's unobtrusive. It's covert. Kids feel really comfortable with that medium. That's why it became so popular here in the United States. And about 75% of kids actually text during school time. I know a lot of administrators don't really like hearing that idea, especially if it's kids that are texting during class. But what we've discovered is that kids are going to use it and there's very little we can do to stop it, so we might as well try to utilize it for good. The other way is through the internet. There's a web submission portal. That's also two-way, and I'll show you how that works. And then we can also receive tips through our Facebook page through social media. And it's all anonymous. All the tips come in real time. Administrators are notified immediately when those alerts come through so that we can really try to capture information and bring more of the problems and concerns that kids and parents have forward to the front when a school is trying to make changes. So this is really what we think is awesome about it. Number one, it removes the fear of peer retaliation for the student. It gets more students engaged because it's a lot easier than coming down to the office, especially because you're afraid somebody might see you. And then also, ultimately, we've been able to change the environment of the school. Just to give you an idea, last year, in just a sample of a few hundred schools, we were able to intervene in about 43 suicides. We confiscated over 400 weapons, caught tons of kids with drugs on school grounds. We even had a couple instances with the tip line that was able to intervene in home abuse cases where administrators were able to help kids who were being abused by their parents. So the system has had some really great, important successes, and we're really excited to try to help other people really see how that goes. Here's a couple of other really interesting things. So as far as engagement goes, we did a study that said 9 out of 10 students really feel comfortable reporting through a program like SchoolTipline. The problem is that when you take away that anonymous factor, those go way down. Kids are way less willing to come forward. The other thing that's really interesting and important to understand is that this is what we're trying to talk about today is very different than a one-way anonymous admission portal that's going to happen in that kind of exists in a lot of situations now. Some schools, what they do, which is a good start, is a bully box that you might put in the counselor's office, usually a shoebox or something with a slit in it where a kid can drop an anonymous note. But those get very little use, and worse yet, if a kid doesn't give you enough information, it's very difficult to get back with them. Probably the most common question that we get from administrators is the rate of false reporting. So I just wanted to throw that up there. Our stats have been shown that the amount of false reporting is very, very low, less than 2% of tips that are false. And usually that includes, when you say false tip, most false tips are actually just a kid who is, kids don't really false report. I mean, you don't get somebody that says so-and-so is actually bullying when they're not. What we mean when we say false reporting is a kid who just is being silly and thinks that he can be funny by saying something dumb. So that's what we really mean by false reporting. And we have a couple of things that I'll show you that we do to try to decrease the rate of false reporting. But again, I think it's important to note that we're truly the only system, third party, that allows for truly anonymous communication, which is really important to understand. Okay, so this is a really interesting quote done by a social media expert named Curated. And he said, "It was the covert nature of texting that spurred its widespread adoption by most young people. Texting allows for a relatively unobtrusive way to communicate." So just another really interesting thing to think about as far as text messaging goes. So this is just to give you an idea. I'm going to actually go through the live system here in a second to show you, but every single school gets their own web page that has a specific place where you can submit tips online. It also gives instructions for submitting text tips as well through the system. A tip is submitted, message is passed through our system and sent to the administrator. Then you can respond as the administrator. If you can actually have the alerts go straight to your cell phone and have a text message conversation back and forth. But everything runs through the school's tip line phone number, so that way nobody actually has to worry about information being shared. So the administrator's not going to be giving their cell phone out to students, and students vice versa can be able to talk back and forth. And then the administrators also have a portal where they can come in where all the information is tracked. We have a case management system, which I want to show you, that's very important for the success of the tip line, which obviously looks a little bit like this, but I'm going to show you some more in the live system. And then obviously there's the awareness side, which is extremely important. So there's a couple of things that we do for administrators that is crucial for the success of a program like this. Obviously there's a couple of really easy things that we can do. We provide some, there's an example there, it's a small version of some posters that we give you that you can hang around your school, letter templates that you can send home for parents. We have videos that go through and demonstrate the program. They range from about 2 minutes to 10 minutes, depending on how in-depth you want to go. In my mind, for the students, they really only need about a 2-minute demonstration. In fact, the ones that we have is really just animated to make it simple and easy. And there's a couple of additional add-ons to the program that can make it even more effective. There's a surveying tool, which I'll show you, which I didn't write here. But then we also provide an email newsletter template, which is really powerful so that you can send out a newsletter to your parents and students, not just about bullying, but about all kinds of events that are happening at school, and really make a difference in the communication out. And then there's also mass alert functionality for emergency alert in the event that there's a school shooter or there's a tornado or all kinds of different things that you might want to get out quickly. You can do through SMS and text messaging and email. So let me show you a little bit about the system. So this is our website, SchoolTipline.com. If I were a student, I could come in here. Obviously, we've got news about things that's going on and stories of people who have experienced things. But if I were a student and I wanted to go and submit a tip online, all I'd have to do is click on Find My School. Most kids, actually, we encourage schools to put a link to their website directly on their school website, which is really helpful, obviously, because it'll make sure that the kids don't have to remember the subdomain or go to SchoolTipline. But even if I didn't, if I just went to SchoolTipline.com, I could search for my school. This is a Demo 1, Safe Place High School. So if I come in here, this would be my Tipline page. So we can actually add additional content over here with other instructions or images or things that the school might want to put in. But it's really simple. I can come in here. I'll see that my school has a keyword, which is important for texting in tips, and also this phone number. We have the ability to do one of two things with the text tip line. One is that we can provide a short code, so like what you'd see if you were going to like a restaurant that wanted you to sign up for coupons, right? You'd have our short code is 847. 847 stands for tip. We can use that at the school. Some schools like to do that because it's easier to remember. But at the same time, there's the downside to that is that a lot of students especially carry plans that are no contract phones. And even though they may have unlimited texting, a lot of times smaller carriers will not allow short code messages to go through. So what we did was we started to actually provide schools with their own individual 10-digit numbers. So this one, for example, is a number that's generated. It will have your own school's area code in it. Now, the other thing that's important is this keyword. The one that we did here is obviously just the initials of our demo school. A lot of schools, you can choose that keyword to be whatever you want. A lot of schools choose it to be their mascot or, some other thing that everybody's going to remember really easy. The keyword's important because it tells the system that a student is submitting a brand new tip. So if I weren't to have that keyword, I'd get a bounce back message that says, make sure you give me a keyword. But I only have to use that keyword to start a new tip conversation. Once I start talking back and forth with the administrator, I don't have to put the keyword in every time. In fact, the keyword, again, will start a new tip. It's only to start the conversation, which, again, is really important because we believe that it needs to be two ways so you can get all the information you need. I'm going to show you what a web submission tip would look like. So let's say I come in here, I want to submit a tip. I'll tell you what I know. So let's say I'm being bullied. Q punched me at lunchtime. So that was who was involved. It happened at lunchtime. Where it happened, it actually happened in the hallway 3, and I haven't told him to. Okay, so pretty simple to start the conversation, right? I can say what happened, and then I have a couple of choices. I can choose to stay anonymous. I can leave that unchecked. And then if I want to stay anonymous, I can still give my email. The email address won't be sent to the school officials, but it helps us in getting that two-way communication easier facilitated. We've discovered that a lot of students will still give us their email address, which is really helpful, obviously, because that way we'll be able to talk back and forth with them. If if I want to share my information, I just click here and it gives me options to fill out all that information. So in this event, though, I'm not going to give you my email, and I'm going to show you how you can actually still talk two ways as the student. Then we also have the ability to choose who I want to tell. You can see that me and Susan here are the only two that actually manage the tip line. So I could choose to tell Todd what's happening. But this feature is actually optional, so we can turn off the ability to actually choose an assignee as a student. That's an important feature to know because some schools like to have that on because it puts a face to the tip line. The kids feel more secure because they're telling them they feel like they're telling somebody they know who's managing the system. Other schools don't like to have that feature simply because for the exact same reason as, well, maybe if they know that officer so-and-so as the school security officer is receiving it, that they're going to be less likely to respond. So it just depends on the nature of the school and what they want to do. But in any case, when a student chooses who they want to tell, that doesn't actually affect what happens on the back end. We always alert every single administrator. We never tell just one person. Everything is put into our system. It's never sent directly to an individual. That way we can always protect the integrity of the information that we receive. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this tip. It'll ask me if I want to do it. I say sure. So now it'll tell me that my tip's submitted. And as part of training with the students, there's this thing right here, the case ID. This is probably the most important piece that allows us to have two-way communication and keep everything entirely anonymous. So if a student doesn't give us any information, they haven't created a login account, they can still come back and follow up on the actions of the tip just by remembering this case ID right here. So SLQ-V6. So we'll want to keep that there. Okay, so now I've just switched over to an admin account. So this is my administrator's account right here. I'll refresh my inbox, and that way it should show our new tip. You'll notice this is the tip that I just received. As Susan, I can actually receive a text message, and I can also receive an email if I want. I can have both or either or neither. Whenever a tip comes in, I have full control over the preferences of how I manage that information. Now, as a school period goes on, you'll notice that this is your inbox. We never delete any information out of the system, and you may end up having, I would say that most schools, when they're doing really well, will have about anywhere between 50 and 100 tips in an entire semester. Usually you're going to be seeing that's in like a really high case. Most schools probably get around 2 to 4 tips a week. But in any case, let's say you have a whole bunch of open tips that have a lot of information going on. Some have been reviewed, but you haven't started taking action yet. Some you're still investigating. Some you haven't even read yet. You have all that information here. So I can actually sort by the status of the tip, which you'll be able to change in the case management side. Or I can also basically sort by the category that the student chose. All tips that come in through text messaging are marked as SMS tips. Here's one down here, which is an SMS tip. Which is just a test one, obviously. But if it's an SMS tip, I can change the category manually inside the case manager, which is important. Well, let's go back and look at our tip that we just submitted. So I can click in here. This is the top of what I see as an administrator. I can see that a student just submitted a tip. They chose to tell Todd, but what if Todd's job isn't to actually handle fights in the hallway because he's a counselor and maybe that's the assistant principal's job? Well, you can actually choose the assignee you want to have. I can also change the status now. Well, I'm gonna, there's action pending. Maybe we need to go take something. Eventually, I can then go decide that we gave detention to Q for punching me in the face. You can choose an alternate case ID to make it easier to search for information, to make sure that things match up if you have things in other tracking systems, so that you can keep things organized that way. You can add also say who's involved. I can say Q I can say Q. And then I could add in his student ID, right, as well, and add that. So now I know Q is involved, and I can add as many as I want. If they told an adult, I can say, all right, if they are an adult, I can say if they are or not. Now here's the other part that's really important. So as an administrator, like I said, you can respond from your cell phone, but you can also respond right here from the portal. So if Q punched me in the face, I can say, it was at lunchtime. Has this happened before, for example? Now, as a reply, I've now started that two-way conversation. So as a student, if I gave you my email address, then I would get an email that has a reply in it and would prompt me to then go back and answer your question. In the event that I don't, obviously, I'm going to want to be able to track back. So that's where the case ID comes in help. So up at the top is a place where I can type in my case ID. I search for it. Well, then I can see my case. I can see that there's action pending now, finally. So I know that the school administrators have received my tip and they're taking action. I can also see the question that they ask, and I can say, yeah, every week at 1 p.m., right? So now I basically have this way that I can talk back and forth with the school administrator. We've discovered that what's really interesting is a lot of times for the web submission, a lot of kids feel most comfortable talking late in the evening. And the administrators obviously feel comfortable talking early in the morning. So you'll see a tip from a student at 11:30 p.m., and then the response from the administrator at 7:30 a.m., and then this response from the student again that night after school. So again, it helps to facilitate that communication, but it also gives kids the opportunity to talk anywhere and anytime they feel comfortable. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea about the system. I wanted to share with other things. This is a really interesting tip conversation. Again, here's a really good example from a student. Gave the tip at 9:30 a.m. They're sitting in English class. Noticed the student who had power and asked, wanted to know if if their friend or if they could get some help to catch a kid who had drugs. The administrator responded. They received it late at night. This is really interesting to me. The student's response when they said, "Why did you wait so late to tell us?" Well, I waited later to send it. I didn't know what to do, so I told my boyfriend, and he asked what I should do. He said I should use the tip line anonymously because I would be called a snitch, and I didn't know what to do. So that's kind of interesting as far as what the student said. So then what's neat is then the student was able to then text back and forth. So here's the administrator responded, texted me in class. The student heard something. Then the administrator was immediately able to go down and catch the student in the action. And the student said when he came back, he was all shaky. But then later, it's interesting because we run into this interesting situation where the student then later overhears the student talking to his friend about the person who snitched on him, and that they'll shoot him in the head if he got caught. So the student obviously felt great because there's no indication that that student had any idea who was tipping them, because the system's all anonymous, but the administrator and the student were able to have this full-on conversation back and forth. Now, there's a couple of things that we can do to help schools, a couple of different campaigns. This is just one example. This isn't available everywhere, but to help pay for the system, in some cases, there may be access to, we have some partners that help run shoe drives that collect shoes that go to Africa, and in the event that those programs happen, we're able to basically help the school cover the cost of the program. We also have nonprofit partners that can sometimes help. But even if grants aren't available or the Without Bullying campaign isn't available in the area where you live, what we've discovered is that that we can provide the program at a pretty low cost to the school, and it does wonders to help. So that's the tip line in a nutshell. I guess we'll open the time for some questions for people if they'd like to know more, or anybody has any other questions.
Okay, we did have some questions that came through. Once again, anyone who may have any other questions, feel free to put those through on the chat in the Q&A. To begin with, the first question is, How effective is this against bullying where the antagonist's parents are major financial contributors to a school and unwilling to accept the premise that their child is behaving badly?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I appreciate that a lot. To make sure I understand, I just want to, it'd be nice to see it. I don't know if I can actually see the question. So the question is, in the event that a student is bullying and their parent is a well-to-do person in the community who is a financial backer, donates a lot to the school and things like that, is that going to prevent the effectiveness of the system? Is that am I rephrasing that in an accurate way, Q?
Yep, you are. That's about what they put through, correct?
That's a great. I think that's a great question. What we've discovered in most instances, the people who have a lot of clout in the schools, I don't know of any situation where there's been an instance where a well-to-do community member's student is being targeted as the bully, but I'm not sure how to answer that question super effectively. I would say that in the instances that we have had of big clout members in the community, usually it's been more so in support of the tip line and trying to make the schools a safer place. I would say that much of that would probably have to do with how the school decides to respond. The interesting thing about the system is it provides a tool, we provide awareness, we provide education, and all these other instances, but we generally try not to affect policy as far as how, usually most schools are going to have an anti-bullying policy in place, and while this brings forward information, I would say that generally you'd want to treat it the same as if you were to hear this outside of the system. So I don't know if that answers the question effectively or not, but think of this as this isn't a tool to change the way that you handle anti-bullying situations. It's a tool to enhance the amount of information you receive so that you can intervene more effectively. And obviously we can provide support and help if your anti-bullying policy isn't working great. I mean, we're willing to help give ideas and get you access to expertise. But the program itself isn't focused on how you respond so much as giving you the information so you can respond.
Perfect. All right. I don't see any other questions right now. Once again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put those through. We'll see if any others come through. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any more.
Sure. Well, there's a couple more things I guess I can still show everyone while we're waiting if there's any other questions. So I showed you a little bit about the case log here. There's a couple of other really interesting things to see. Number one are case notes. So in the event that you want to track things that are happening, for example, called Q's mother. You don't want the student to see that, but obviously you can keep note of those here. You can also upload files that might have to do specifically with it. And there's a case log that tracks every single action that's taken, so I can see every single update and change that's been made on this case. So that's really interesting. This is how you would notify us in the event that there's a false step, which again, we rarely, if ever, get. And if we do ever get them, they're usually in the beginning of the year when a school first launches the program, just because kids are kind of testing the water. This is our reports page, which I guess I probably should have told you a little bit more about in the beginning. But we do track every single thing that ever happens. Nothing ever gets removed from the system. So I can see this is all the tips that I've received in my school here. I can basically look at what's in my category. I can check my status. So whether they've been closed and finished or whether they're basically at the process. There's a couple of other reports I can look at. I can actually download a spreadsheet, manipulate the data to do basically whatever I want, give you everything, anything and everything you want. And then you can do that by date range, look by origin, over time, by category, by origin. Origin's really interesting because you can usually, that'll tell you whether or not it's by web or text messaging. This is a demo one. Most of these are going to be web because you do less demonstration with text messaging because you, especially on a webinar, you can't see me doing it. But generally, I would say probably have the majority of our tips are it's close to 50-50, but it's more text than it is web. So kids use more text than they do web. In fact, in some places, it's as high as 70% text, just to give you an idea versus web. We also, at the top level, as a super admin, we track everything. We have a whole bunch of additional reports, which we sometimes will send out to administrators. Everything from tips by time of day, so you can see when tips come in at the highest rate of day. Most, actually, just to give you an idea, I'd say 50% of the tips come in the afternoon hours during school, so between 1 and 4 o'clock is usually when we receive most tips. Maybe that's because a lot of the instances that happen are in the morning, but the kids don't have more access to a safe place where they can send in a text message in the afternoon. We actually receive a huge percentage of tips outside of school hours, which is really interesting to consider. I'll just show you a couple other things that as far as features of the site that I didn't discuss a whole lot in the initial presentation about the tip line. We also encourage schools to solicit information from the students, so we have a surveying tool. So if I were to come in here, I could do an initial school safety survey. And this is a preview of a survey that we put together. I could upload a list of all my students and parents and send that out to them and then get a survey done of every single thing. Editor here is actually, I think, one of the easiest easiest editors in the planet. I've used a lot of surveying templates before. We keep it really simple for you, so there's not a lot of bells and whistles on it, but you have most of the things that you'll need. So, for example, do you feel safe in the classroom? To edit this, pop up the question, decide that I actually want this to be a drop-down. Still want my options to be yes, no, but I'll add the option of maybe, and I don't want it to be required. So I'll update it, and now I'll change my template, so now I have a different question. So it's pretty easy. You can start a survey from scratch if you want. We can also provide templates on a global level where we can provide safety surveys out to the school, and then really all the school have to do is then pick the template they want to choose to publish it. They can make it public or private. If it's private, it'll only be sent out by email, and only those people who receive it can take it. You can set the length of time that it's open. I don't know if this is a demo school, so I don't think I have a history of it, but you'll get reports on that as well with surveys. Another piece of this that's really interesting is the Mass Alert program. We also keep this very simple. So you can actually have groups which you have the community opt in for. So, like, for example, if I go under my settings here and go to group alert preferences, here are the standard groups that we make, general, parents, and students. But you can actually, under your school settings, you can add additional groups. So, like, say you wanted to even use it for your football games or whatever, you just wanted to send out a text of who won the football game and what the score was on Friday night. Well, you can set up a football group, and then the way it works is if I'm a member of the community, let me go back to my student page, I can go to alert groups, and you can actually just have them opt in. So I choose that I want email, and I want email for the general one. I want to opt in for the parent group by cell, and the student, student group by cell or whatever. Enter in that information, opt in, and it's the same way with opting out. You just choose which ones you want to be part of or not part of, and you opt out. You can also opt out, obviously, with standard things like sending text, stop in, whatever, which will opt you out of the group. But so that's one way. You can set up groups, which are all where people opt in to be part of the group. But I can also import lists. So if you have student information, you just import your students' names and emails and your parents' names and emails, and then you can use that for both alerting people via of the survey when you launch those, and also for the Mass Alert program. If you don't want to, alert people about a survey that way, you can actually just launch it, tell people to go to your SchoolTipline page, take the survey, and then, again, I can just go to the survey page. And if there's a live survey for me to take, I would just click on it and I'd take the survey page. So that's how that all works. So hopefully that gives you a couple of other interesting insights. Now, I want to show you a little bit, if I can, about, let me go to my mail here. Let's actually show you the email newsletters that we send out. Here's the, these are tip alerts that I received, just as FYI for community who's watching. So go to Pleasant Grove here. So every single, okay, so here you go. So one of the things that's really neat, this is an additional service that we can provide, is an automated curated email. So there's a lot of email service providers like MailChimp out there, or Constant Contact, which a lot of schools use. This isn't intended to replace your email newsletter process of how you send emails out. This is made to help you have a more engaging and effectively sent email that is full of good content. So you'll notice here, as soon as you can basically, this is all automatically curated through the system. Works really cool. The way it works is a school actually can go in and the platform actually lets you, it basically filters out the most relevant, fresh, hot topics. So what it does is, like, say there's an interesting article that was printed in the local newspaper about your school. Basically have a bunch of keywords and information that are things that are happening, and that information can all come forward, and then it all gets put in here. So it's basically an automatically curated content newsletter. So you can pull stuff directly from your school's website. So you'll notice it's colored audition. I can look at things that are going on in the state about education. I could have a safety section. So this is really interesting, right? Again, to help with reminding people about the availability of zip line services. So again, and this is all, it basically can be done within 5 minutes to a half an hour of time with very little effort, and you're able to get really relevant content that's all social media enabled. So it's a really, really, really cool service. We like to encourage schools to do that with the program, obviously, because it can just make such a big difference. So I figured I'd share a little bit about that with you as well. So any other questions, Q, now that we've covered some additional information about the program?
I haven't seen any come through. Once again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put those through in the chat or the Q&A. Yeah, I don't see any at this time.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate everybody for listening to our presentation. If you'd like to get any additional information about SchoolTipline, you can contact me directly. My email is tkirk@mobyq.com. You can also send it at tkirk@schooltipline.com. If you go to our website, which I guess it's taking a second to load, so it looks funny, but this is our 1-800 number. You can actually contact us through this. It's on the top page of our website. If you want to contact us, if you'd like to get additional information, you can come here to the site as well. You can request some more information this way. Just let us know. We're always here to help. We love providing help and resource to schools. You can, like I said, look forward to hearing from some of you, because I really think that the program can do wonders for a school. So that's pretty much it. That's what I got.
All right, Todd, thanks again for your presentation. I did have a couple of things that did come through right now in the Q&A. Once again, if you could give your email one more time.
Oh, sure, yeah. So, I don't think I actually, probably should have put this in my presentation so that you could see it. I'll type it in here now. Still see my screen. You can send it to toddkirk@schooltipline.com, or tkirk@schooltipline.com. Sorry about that.
Okay, perfect. And then, this is an interesting question, but how quickly could this type of software spread nationwide?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. we want it to spread as fast as we possibly can. There's nothing out there that is as comprehensive and as full-scale reaching as what we're trying to offer right now. It can spread pretty fast, assuming that we can get the word out to as many schools as we possibly can. So I love the question, and I guess the answer to your question is we can move as fast as the community will let us go. It's really easy to implement in the school because the setup process is really fast. We have a really easy, basically, user interface where our staff they don't have to be super programmers to set up your school and get everything in place and working correctly. So it really takes a matter of a few minutes to get a school set up. And then, obviously training at school with the administrators can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, depending on how tech-savvy you are and how many questions you have and how much you want help from us in promoting the program in the school. But we'll provide all the materials that a school needs. On the other side of that coin, some of the things that we love to really do is try to get as many advocates as we possibly can before the program. So we think it can spread a lot faster when we have kind of a bottom-up community-driven support. So we do a lot to reach out to community members to try to help them get the word out. We love help from administrators to refer us to other schools, and the more the better in our mind, because we really look at this as a cause that we're extremely passionate about. Again, it's so everywhere in the news, and I think every single administrator is really top of mind right now. But it's hard when you don't know what the best solutions are out there to try. And there's a lot of companies out there who really are trying to capitalize on this from a purely economic standpoint. We believe that we want to have this as many schools as possible, and we're less concerned about making gazillions of dollars off of it. So we just want it in as many schools as we possibly can get. So, and I hope that answers the question. It's a great question.
Okay, perfect. That looks like all the questions. Todd, thanks for your time and for the presentation. Oh, look, one more. Is there a Facebook page for SchoolTipline?
There is, yes. And you can get to the Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/SchoolTipline.
Perfect.
Oh, we also have a Twitter feed as well, and we're just at SchoolTipline. And we try to stay pretty active with our SchoolTipline feed on both our Facebook page and our Twitter feed, talking about news and information and statistical reports and anything and everything that has to do with things that are happening with school safety. So we love your follow, we love your like on Facebook and Twitter, because those things are going to make a huge difference in you kind of getting an idea of some of what we do and what we're about.